I'm standing beside one of my favorite lilacs, and I'm going to use it to show you how to rejuvenate a shrub. We've had a late spring this year, and the lilac has just finished flowering, and the general rule of thumb for pruning lilacs is to prune it right after it flowers. Well, it turns out that that rule is really for the benefit of people. We tell you to prune lilacs right after they flower so that we get the maximum number of flowers out of the shrub. As far as the shrub's concerned, it would be much better to prune this in late winter. The plant has put a lot of energy into growing new leaves. We're going to come along and cut a lot of those off, and that's not really good for the tree. It's better to do all this pruning in spring. The problem is if you do that, you'll get less flowering because you're going to cut off some of the flower buds. Now it turns out lilacs are pretty tough plants. You could probably prune them anytime you want. You're not really going to damage the plant very much. Now, to remind you of the 3 steps of pruning, step 1 is to take care of all the problems. Step 2 is to do rejuvenation pruning. Now, when and why would you do that? Well, I don't do it very often. And if you prune on an annual basis and keep your plant nice and open, keep it airy so that the branches aren't too close together, everything's growing well, you probably never have to rejuvenate. But if you have a shrub that's been neglected for a while, then rejuvenation might be just a ticket. This lilac was planted probably about 9 years ago, and I haven't really done a lot of pruning. I do take off the old flower heads because this shrub happens to be in a very visible space, and I do that mostly for aesthetics. I really don't think it does a lot for the shrub itself. But you'll notice that it's getting pretty large, and if you look through the center here, you can't see through the shrub. It's pretty congested inside here. You'll also notice it's getting pretty tall. I'm 6 feet tall, and this thing's a good 10 feet. And each year the flowers are getting higher and higher on this shrub, and that's not really good from an aesthetic point of view. The plant's just getting a bit too big. If we have a look inside this shrub, what you notice is that there's some old branches in here. They're getting quite big. Diameter is about like this on them. Now you can tell they're old both by the size and by the bark. It's getting pretty rough. And these are the branches that are going right up to the top of the shrub. Then there's a bunch of new growth here, which is only a couple years old. It's much shorter. It hasn't started flowering yet, but it's getting to be a good size. But there's too many branches. It's too congested. And except for these outer ones, you'll notice there aren't a lot of leaves down here. When we're rejuvenating a shrub, what we want to do is to thin this out, but we also want to get rid of some of the old growth. So we take a look in here and identify a few of the very largest stems, and we take those out. Then we let these young ones start growing and take over for the plant. This does a couple things. It keeps the branches young, which means that you get more flowering, and they stay a bit shorter, which means that it fits into the garden better. You want your shrub flowering at around the 6-foot mark so you can nicely see the flowers. Especially with a plant like this. It's very fragrant, and you want to be able to get up nice and close to it and smell those flowers. So I'm going to identify a couple of these, and I'll just take them out. The tool that works best for this is a pruning saw. The branches are a bit too large for loppers. I could use a chainsaw in here, but it's pretty congested, which makes it hard to get a chainsaw in there. This tool is really the best option. When I cut these branches, I'm going to cut them so that it leaves a stub of a couple inches above ground. There's a couple of secrets to doing this kind of pruning. What most people like to do is they like to take small pieces off. So they'll get their pruners out and they do a little bit here, and they do about 100 little cuts. Remember that every cut you make generates 2 or more buds to start growing. So you create a really congested plant, and that's the exact opposite of what we're trying to accomplish here. The way to do this pruning is to make as few cuts as possible, but take a lot of material out. So I've made 4 cuts, and I've taken a huge amount of material out of the tree. Still looks fairly congested in here because there's a lot of new young growth coming. I could take more out at this point and thin it out, but you never want to take more than 1/3 of your shrub out. If you prune too much, the shrub will go crazy and make a whole bunch of new growths. And that just creates more problems, and you got to prune out all those extra branches. Lilacs are pretty aggressive growers, and the pruning I've just done is going to generate a lot of new bud growth. So it's going to have too many branches in here. So what I'll do is come along in late winter and cut some of those out. I want to start opening up this center a little bit. This is not a one-time pruning event. This is going to take several years to get this done. Each year you come along, take a few more of the branches out until the shrub is opened up and growing the way you want. After that, you use regular annual pruning to keep it in shape. If you prune regularly, you never have to rejuvenate a shrub. I have a lot of other pruning videos, and I'll put a link to those in the top right-hand corner of the screen. Have fun pruning your shrubs.